Welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for another ATP Ride Report webinar session. My name is Ashley Pilon. I oversee airline and corporate partnerships at ATP. And today we're going to be joined by Kit Darby, president of Kit Darby Aviation Consulting. And he's going to be sharing information with us on an airline recovery forecast. So if you're tuning in for the first time, your microphones will be muted for this session, and feel free to communicate with us via the chat box in the lower right. And also put any questions you might have for Kit in the Q&A area, and we'll get to them at a later point in this session. So for our knowledge, I'm just going to go ahead and share a poll to you guys. Let us know your timeline to applying to the airlines. All right, so it looks like we have some that have already submitted applications, a lot of others that are in the 1 to 2 year range, some 3 to 6 months, some 1 to 3 months. Okay. Perfect. We'll give you about 5 more seconds to complete that. Okay, so it looks like the majority of you still have a little bit of time to go. So we'll go ahead and we'll share that to you guys real quick. Looks like most of you are 1 to 2 years from now. Perfect. And then go ahead and just want to again say welcome, Kit. Thanks for joining us for another session and for coming to share and impart your knowledge with us.
A little bit about my background. I've been in this career information business for over 30 years, working with several 100,000 pilots that have made the run at the airlines. And many of them have tried things that were very successful and some that weren't. So what we're going to try to do is adapt our information to the things that are best for you. The idea is that we can learn from those that have gone before us, and in so doing, perhaps shorten the path from where you are to where you want to be. And of course, we have this huge question today about what COVID's going to do to our training and careers going forward. There we go. So this is not based on actual data. This is based on previous recoveries of what this one might look like. So this forecast right now, we're in this phase right here, asking ourselves, how deep will it go? Well, it went down to about 95. How long will it last? Well, the recovery's has begun, but we're back to about 75, 80%. And then we're looking at increasing numbers of infections around the country, increasing hospitalizations. And it's really too early to see the death rate go up, but 2 to 3 weeks after these go up, there's usually an increase in the deaths, and that's going to cause some adjustments. Some states have already slowed their recovery, and a few others have stopped the recovery. We may even see it go backwards. So it's really hard to define what's going to happen right now. We'd have to say we don't know, but this is the structure of what a recovery might look like. So if we'll go to the next one.
I do just want for us to maybe just dissect this a little bit more for some of our viewers. So RPMs as a pilot, we obviously think revolutions per minute, but can you describe what that means on this for some of our viewers that are tuning in?
Certainly. The RPMs in this case are revenue passenger miles. So this RPM that we're talking about is a paying passenger in a seat, and that's how the airlines make their money. So, and they're pretty much money driven, very large businesses with a high capital expense and a relatively low margin. So they're a big business, and they're driven by paid passengers in seats. The good news is that those seats are grouped together into airplanes, and we fly those airplanes. So the seat is like a commodity, an individual seat that's offered each day for flight. If you don't fill it, it's lost. It's a commodity. And the good news is, as pilots, we fly groups of that commodity around in airplanes. So this is the foundation of everybody's forecast, and what it would look like, what RPMs look like will be what pilot hiring and recovery will look like as well.
Perfect, thank you. So while we're on this one, I do want to ask another question too, looking forward in the next couple months, because we're looking at this and you've said it's comprised based on past situations and experiences. Are there any really important dates that we want to keep an eye on as far as a benchmark, just in terms of comparison? Obviously, we just had the 4th of July. How much of an indicator are major travel holidays when relating to at least the leisure sector of consumer confidence in travel?
Well, the holidays, major holidays, the Christmas season, all produce increased traffic. And then there's slow periods, so we call it the dark ages from January to Easter. There's one right before Thanksgiving, everybody goes back to school. Travel goes down between the beginning of school and Thanksgiving. So there's a whole bunch of, but we've taken those seasonal variations out. These lines would not be straight. They would be all over the place based on the seasonal variations that normally occur. And what we've done is smooth that out to show the long-term trend. So that's how what this is the long-term trend, regardless of the ups and downs caused by holidays and holiday seasons.
Perfect, thank you. And so I'll go ahead and advance you to the next slide.
Okay, so these are the retirements, and the reason they're important, and American, by the way, is the winner up here with the most retirements. Delta is next. United is very strong as well. The good news is that in addition to RPMs, pilots will be leaving in relatively large numbers. This is 1,000 up here. So we're looking at years of 600 to 1,000 pilot retirements at these big three airlines. So as we go into this 1 or 2, 3 years in the future, each year, a large number of pilots will retire, and those pilots have to be replaced. In order to operate those RPMs, we're going to have to hire pilots not only for the increasing RPMs, but also for the pilots that will be leaving the marketplace. The next slide summarizes this into a single number, and it adds to it the estimated regional airlines. Those were major airlines only that we looked at. So it adds to it the regional airlines, an estimate of corporate and fractional flying, fractional being the time-shared airplane like NetJets, FlexJet, those type of people. And then a small amount for early and medical retirements, which runs about 0.5% a year throughout the career. And it peaks up a little bit when you get around 55 or 60. Those medicals in particularly go up a little bit. When you put all that together, we end up with an average over the next 20 years of 41 pilots, with it peaking, almost all of the next 10 years over that average, up in the 4,000 to 5,000 pilots a year. So those pilots will be added to the pilots needed for returning RPMs, and that brings pilot hiring back before we get back to 100%. So the next slide, I believe, will sort of just cap all this information into a single line.
Sure. Before we go to that, I do want to highlight 2031. And can you talk a little bit about what's causing that increase?
Yes, that's I promised to research that, and I haven't gotten there yet. There was a spike in the retirements at one airline, UPS in particular, that causes that blip in the future, and we don't know whether it's record keeping or some unusual occurrence in hiring where a lot of pilots were hired around the same age. But either way, that's a UPS blip. Overall, hard to explain right now because I don't really have the answer, but it is UPS as an airline that causes that spike. So this is a single line total. Again, just emphasizing the next 10 years, 4,000 to 5,000 pilots a year will retire and have to be replaced if we're going to get back to 100%, causing the pilot hiring to return to normal a year or two in advance of the recovery. So the next slide will show us more about that.
Now with this one, I think what's really important on it before we move on is obviously we're in a much different situation than the financial crisis of 2008. But what you can see here is there's also a far greater number of pilots that are retiring with an increasing number over the next 5 years. So that's something to keep in mind for you, those of you that are a little bit earlier on in your career.
Yeah, more than double. So when you make it cumulative, you see that there's the majors have the majority of the new jobs, the blue portion, and then we have regional airlines, a fair amount of hiring, corporate, fractional, smaller groups, and the medicals. But when you put it together, we're looking at nearly 80,000, over 80,000 new pilots, and we're going to get back to a shortage in short order. I mean, this last 2 or 3 years, we could be hiring a year sooner than that, or 1 to 2 years. And as soon as they start hiring again, we believe that this situation that we're in is going to depress. As fewer people are going to start, fewer people are going to complete their training during this downturn, which is exactly the wrong thing to do. The idea is to get qualified and experienced during the downturn, so when hiring returns that you're available and qualified to get the job. And true, you might be a flight instructor a little bit longer, you might be delayed at the regionals for a little while, but the people that get into the beginning of the next boom, they will likely never be furloughed. They'll never have a problem. So getting in early, it's all about timing. And pilots that get in late in the game, like right now, they're much more likely to be in a position where they have to take some time off as they go along. So, I did this in my own career. I mean, I got hired during a boom. I was off for a while. I got hired again. I was off for a while. I went through that, and then I got hired on an upswing, and I stayed and worked at that company until I retired. So it's all about timing. And the thing to remember is you don't control the timing. You can't look out there and say, I wish. It doesn't work that way. All you can do is get qualified and experienced. I can assure you when the hiring resumes, the most qualified and experienced pilots will get the interview. We talked last time about they interview the most qualified, they hire the people they like. So being qualified gets you the interview. Having a good interview, being a good communicator, understanding and preparing for the interview, that's what gets the job. But the first step is to get the interview. And to get the interview, you need qualifications and experience. We have to add to that probably recommendations. So don't forget to keep track of the people you fly and learn from as they go forward. You're going to need their recommendation in the future. It'll get you in a little bit sooner. In some cases, it'll get you in when nothing else will get you in. So recommendations are very important. Don't hesitate to send those Christmas cards and buy the occasional beer and stay in touch with the people that you're learning to fly with or learning to fly from. They will be a big asset in the future. So we put it all together. We have the effects of the downturn, which are significant. Looking over here, this is October, so the 10th. So the stimulus will end in October. We would have reduced the number of pilots right now. We have too many pilots. And this is a total estimation. I don't know how deep or how long, but we're estimating a significant number of pilots will be out of work. And that's scary. When you talk to them, they're going to be sad. And I've, as an individual, I've been out of work 5 times in the airline business. And yet I retired as a senior captain at United, about number 500 on a list of 6,000, flying wide body airplanes to Europe for my last 7 years. All of that, including the mishaps that happened to me, still ended up to be a great career. I really loved the flying. I made a ton of money. I had great time off. So this rocky start that may occur is not the end of the world. But many people, when they're initially laid off, take it that way. They get very, very depressed, and they'll share their grief with you. If you talk to them, they'll say, oh, don't be an airline pilot. Go be a fireman, do something else. And yet those that stick with it, that take their training, build their experience, and take what jobs are available and fly during this rough period, they will be back the most qualified, the most experienced, and they will continue on with their career. But it will always be an up and down industry. The good news is that once you get about 5 to 10% of a seniority list behind you, your chances of being furloughed are very small. Most pilots, 80% of the pilots are never furloughed. So most people won't be furloughed. But if you get in at the wrong time, which is at the top of the curve, then you're more likely. Now we are at the bottom of the curve. People that get hired going forward will likely never be furloughed again. So this is the stimulus effect. So right now, the CARES Act is paying the airlines to keep their pilots employed. So that money that they're going to take from them and the incentive to keep everybody working ends in October. That's why this steep line here in October. How many will happen here? Well, this is a guess, but we're getting tremendous participation in the early retirement offers from the airlines. 1,000 people have signed up at Delta. almost 1,000 at American. United's not out yet. Other airlines have programs. So what that's going to do is take the number of people that we need to reduce and reduce it by the number of early retirements that we have. So there's another bonus in there. Don't know how good it's going to be, but we're at least at 3,000 or 4,000 right now off the bottom here that will not have to go because other pilots will either take a leave of absence or retire early in large numbers. Disregarding that, if we had furloughed down to a certain level, as the RPMs come back, the retirements continue. So we have the RPM return and the replacement pilots for the retirements, and that brings the recovery from the RPM recovery. The pilot hiring recovery is up to a year sooner due to the retirements. So that's the good news. Retiring pilots being replaced will shorten the length of the furloughs, make pilot hiring come sooner, and the pilot shortage, where there's great opportunities for pilots, return sooner as well.
And with this, when talking about the number that might be taking advantage of the early retirement, for some of our viewers that are a little bit earlier on in their career, can you just describe what some of the benefits are that are offered in those early retirements to help make, you know, those that are towards the end of their career take advantage of it?
Okay, for those that follow on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter, we have a comparison of these arrangements that we've been working on that we're going to post either later today or tomorrow. And it starts out with an early retirement option. And that option can run anywhere from 5 years at Southwest to 2 or 3 years at other companies. And they basically let you retire early, and then they pay you a portion of your pay, around 50 to 60 hours a month. So you don't work for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You make 60% of your pay. It normally includes a retirement contribution, medical benefits, travel benefits, at least for a period of time, 2 or 3 years. So it's they're basically paying you to retire early. And it's a great incentive. Like I said, 900 pilots or so at American, over 1,000 have signed up at Delta. United's program's not out yet. So, but it'll be similar. So this is an incentive. There's also leaves of absences available where they'll let you take a leave, sometimes with pay. Most of the time, just if you want time off, you can get it. If you wanted to finish your education or run a business or raise a family, whatever, if you have the resources, you can simply take time off. And then, but the biggest one is the early retirements. And that they're in the next 2 or 3 years, and they fill in right in here. They raise up the number of pilots that are gone, so we don't have to have reductions of that number. And I would anticipate at the 3 major airlines alone that it will be close to 3,000 pilots. And then, of course, we have the other majors, and even some regionals have similar programs. So all throughout the industry, we're going to thin the ranks, which will reduce the need and reduce the number of excess pilots that we have. Okay, so we have, this is just, the NBAA is the National Business Aircraft Association. They publish a comprehensive salary survey each year, and you may be thinking, great, I need to get my hands on that. It is a closed document. It only goes to those that participate in the survey. It might be available at great expense, but it's a very large document, very detailed. And what it allows us to do is look at the pay rates at the top corporate companies and give you an idea of what that's like. So the next slide, what I've gone to, I have the last 20 years of these, and I've pulled out, these are the green numbers, are the numbers that are available in the survey. So you can see it doesn't give you a very big picture. But then they also show small, medium, large airplanes, and those vary based on a percentage. So what I've done from the green numbers, I've interpolated the numbers up and down in the column, and I've estimated the numbers left and right based on the information in the survey. In fact, NBAA called me after I did this and said, how did you do that? We don't have that level of detail. And I said, this is how I did it. Same thing I described to you. So these are very good jobs. I mean, co-pilots starting at 135, captains at 200 on medium-sized airplanes, going up into the 200s almost 200 on the co-pilots. So this is a great opportunity, and corporate is one of the areas that is doing better, along with fractional, charter. You know, they didn't go down 95%. They went down 30%, and many of them have bounced back almost at 100%. A few of them are still growing and hiring, which is a way better market than the airlines. So just to see that there are still some good jobs available, I analyze the job posting companies. So I sign up as a pilot that needs a job, which is my days are over. And when I do that, I get all the job postings nationwide. And I analyzed it recently. And of course, the airline positions, except for some international positions, have gone away. But a large number of corporate, mostly corporate, fractional, charter, those companies are doing well. Another segment, I don't have pay numbers here, but military contract and military, of course, nothing better than a government job during a downturn. So we are facing a downturn as a result of the adjustments we've made for the COVID crisis, and a great place to be. And you say, well, I'm not in the military, but there are contract jobs that fly contract for the military that benefit from the military stability, but they're not a military position. So there's ISR positions overseas. ISR stands for Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance. So you're flying a King Air in a reconnaissance mission overseas for the military. Those jobs are remaining pretty stable. You can work maintenance, pilot flying, test flight. There's a number of things in government positions that are available. So the corporate's not the only way to go, but it shows that the top jobs there are really good jobs. So if you'll move on to the next one, this is what the fractionals look like in February, and the structures. You know, hiring is for the most part has stopped. The bonus system is certainly in question. To read the chart, we have the airlines. Okay, got the right chart in here. You know, first year, fifth year max. Usually the co-pilot maxes out very close to the fifth year anyway. We got captain 5 years, which people were making captain in about 2 years. 10-year and maximum captain. The average is down here. You can add 3 zeros to this to get the annual pay. So 42,000, 116,000. Junior captain, this is the dates that it occurred. Years to captain, you can't really do it much faster than a year and a half. Reminder that you have to have 1,000 hours of airline time in order to be a captain. So if you get hired, you have to fly 1,000. But training, that takes a year and a half, 2 years. So that's where this 1.5 comes from. The number of pilots, number of aircraft. The bonuses were doing good, averaging 16, ranging from 0 to 40. There's a lot of variance in what you see in these numbers. A lot of people that give you a bonus at the end of the first year, after the first year's over, count that bonus in the first year. I don't do that. I put the bonus in the year that you get it. So, and I do have it out the second and third year as well. And so if you add the bonus to the average pay over there, this is what it was averaging. And just a reminder, I've been doing this for 20 years or so. And this number averaged just 5 years ago was 23,000. So we've almost tripled it in 4 years. If the bonus goes away, we're back to 42, which is about twice what it was. So still not bad on an improvement basis. You can certainly make an argument that 42 is a tough number for a professional with a family and kids. I wouldn't disagree. Pay is still pretty low. So these jobs are not so good, the co-pilot jobs, but the captain jobs from 82 to 116, that's about twice the national average, and this almost 3 times the national average. And there is a decent benefits, a 401k retirement portion to this. You can make a really good argument that the captain jobs at the regionals are career positions. Now, they're not quite as good as co-pilot and captain at the majors, which we'll see next, but they are career positions. And many pilots stay with it. You know, they like it. They live in a certain area. They fly. They control their schedule. They have kids, family, kids in school, parents to take care of. So many people are happy here. Not a lot of people happy as regional co-pilots, but as a regional captain, you certainly could call that a career and have a respectable life doing that. Now we go to the next one. This is the majors. And I probably didn't say it this time, but I have in the past. The way I pay most of my bills is I'm an expert witness. So I build career models for pilots, what their career would be worth if they're injured or delayed, whatever. I make an estimate of their career. And then I make a report on that, and I stand behind that at deposition or trial. So I build career models. So this is to help us understand career value. So looking at this, again, first year through the sixth year, the co-pilot pay, the captain on the smallest, and I model conservatively making captain in 11 years, and max captain to show what the potential is. Max captain usually takes 20, 25 years to get to. So looking at the averages passenger, remember you can sort of add the 3 zeros, I've already done that. So 73 up to 278 for passenger. And the cargo starts lower, actually, starts at 66, but jumps right up and stays up and maxes at 338, which is, an incredible job. To put this other things that go with it, there's about 15% you can add to this for benefits, and there's 15 or 16% you can add to it for retirement. So you can add about 30% to this, and this is not working any extra hours, not trying to make extra money, just doing exactly what you're scheduled for. You can significantly increase this if you choose to work extra. The extra that you work is typically paid at a time and a half or even double time, depending on the circumstances. So again, everybody's saying, well, why would I do those numbers on the regional chart? Well, this is the reason you would do the numbers on the regional chart, is to qualify here, where 3 years later you're 135. When you make captain, you're 2.5, and the potential is 275 to 338 as a career. And this is with a 16% company paid retirement. When you take the 16% of this and multiply it out over a career, it yields a lump sum of about $3 million, 3 to 4 million. So and you can live off of that in retirement. The days when there was a paid annuity are gone for the passenger airlines. FedEx and UPS still have a paid retirement along with the bonus. Their bonus is smaller, but they have an annuity, basically, type income, a defined benefit where you get a certain amount each month plus a lump sum. The lump sum is smaller. Another benefit of cargo is that it's less affected by medical or even economic events. I mean, boxes aren't afraid to get on airplanes because they might get sick. So they do a lot better than the passenger companies in medical emergencies. They do better in economic emergencies, downturns and recessions as well, unless it gets really bad. And then, of course, everybody goes down. And in this particular downturn, because of the medical, the cargo business is actually up, way up. So some of them have gotten raises without open contracts at some of the smaller freight companies. The bad news for pilots is there's only about 10% of the pilots are cargo pilots. So not everybody's going to be a cargo pilot. But if you had that opportunity, it's a great place to be if you're concerned about the economic and medical effects going forward. It is a more stable portion of the business, and right now it is booming. The other aspect is the online shopping aspect. It creates cargo, and nothing's created cargo like this the last 3 months. It's actually, it's exploding. So it has actually gone the other way. Not only is it not affected medically itself, but it's benefiting from other people's desire not to be out in public. So things are really good there. And it would be true across the board, from small cargo to large. Typically when a UPS airplane lands, another, or FedEx, smaller airplanes distribute that load out to the smaller communities. So companies like Ameriflight and so forth would also be a beneficiary of the increase in online shopping and the resulting shipping that comes from it. So let's see, how are we doing here? Okay, what's next for us here?
I'm going to go ahead and, guys, this is the end of the slides, but we do have some other data that we want to share with you to help talk about just some areas that you can track to keep an eye on the recovery of the airline.
Okay. So you want me to share that one, or?
I'm going to go ahead and pull up the TSA one now that we wanted to. Do you want to pull up go ahead and pull up the graph for that, and then after I'll show them the checkpoint data.
Okay. Now that I went full screen, it's not working that well. All right. There's the TSA information, and okay, share the screen. Select the data. Okay, so this is the actual TSA data through June 29th. It hasn't changed much. The 4th of July weekend was not a huge blip. I didn't do a lot. So we have across the top the 2019. That's why I said it was all over the place. The seasonal variations are wide, but the actual came down to about 5% and stayed there for a few weeks, a month or so, and then it began creeping back up. And now we're up to about 20 to 30% of where we were. 25, it's actually, we're in July, so it's out here at about 25 to 30%. And the risk is that the infection rate is going back up in some areas, and the lockdowns have been held, or in some cases even increased. A number of countries and regions of the world have excluded the US from travel. So we're not sure where that's going to go. Is it a second wave? Probably not. It's probably not handling the first wave very well. And where it's going to go is hard to say. So, but for now, if you extend this out, there are some folks that would extend that out and say, well, if you do that, it recovers in a year or so. Understandable, but there's other factors at play, such as the departure of a large number of airplanes that won't come back, not just not flying them, not parked, but retired. Basically scrapped. So those airplanes will have to be replaced by new airplanes, and that takes time. There are some possible solutions to that. I mean, there's a lot of 737 MAXs available right now. So if you want to fly those, you probably could get as many airplanes as you would like. So there is a potential upside, but right now we're in a slow recovery. This would be the V. If we came right back up, that would be a V recovery. Right now we're in the U, so we come in and we're now in the U, and the U would come right back up here, and then the L would go out like this. So I was saying it started as a V, transitioned to a U, and now we're in the L recovery phase where it's recovering, and steadily, but it's vulnerable to the effects of the COVID crisis, which we just don't know yet.
And to show you guys the information, so I just shared it in the chat. You can also go ahead to the TSA's website, and this is where Kit is getting this data, and it just shows you the actual numbers every day, so you're able to track. So yesterday, for example, there were 709,000 passengers through the TSA travel throughput. And Kit, correct me if I'm wrong, but initial predictions when this first started, we did want to see about 1 million come July, and so we are seeing a steady increase. It is happening. It's just right now, these are the numbers. This is where you're able to view that data.
Okay. So we're open for questions or comments. We'd like to know what you're concerned about and try to address those issues. One thing we would say is that we feel that your training typically takes, depending on where you are in your training, a couple of years to get the training and build the experience you need to qualify for the regional position. Those 2 years look to be pretty well timed with the recovery. Like I said, you might end up a flight instructor a little longer or at a regional a little longer, but you would be in a prime position to benefit from the recovery and the large number of retirements in the future, which will drive an early recovery for hiring. And of course, we're very optimistic long-term that air travel will continue to grow and prosper.
Yes, and so some other information that we have seen, and Kit, you touched on this as far as the cargo operators. Argus does produce data on the effects of COVID-19 within each sector in the industry. And June, for example, did show that cargo operations were actually at 98% compared year over year, and then charter operations were at about 78%. So that does show you that different facets outside of just the airlines are producing a more rapid recovery than we're seeing with the airlines. But that's not to say that the airlines are not producing some increased routes. Some examples of that, IATA, the International Air Transport Association, did predict, and this is a article that they put out today, that we'll return to 64% of travel by the end of the year, about 71% by 2021, and they estimate that a full return, minus what Kit talked about with the aircraft, to levels of 2019 in 2022. And we are seeing some route increases. So in JetBlue did announce that they're going to begin phasing in 30 new domestic routes this month. Frontier is adding another 18 through the summer. Spirit does plan to operate 550 daily flights in July, and that will put them at exceeding 80% capacity this month. And
Okay.
it looks like
yeah, I had there's a couple of questions in Q&A rather than in the chat. So one of them was advice for older pilots, being in the 40s. I would love to be in the 40s. I'm an older pilot, though. That's way more than 40 for me. But 40 is, there is no age barrier. So in the old days, and there was significant age barriers. There was a 28, 30, 32 barrier when I was coming up, and it was an absolute barrier. You could not be hired. The airline had a limit. And if the limit was 32 and you were 33, they would not interview you, they would not hire you. Well, those days are gone. It was illegal by the new rules. So, and it came about, if you're interested in the history, in the Deregulation Act, when they deregulated the airlines, they knew there were going to be a lot of cutbacks. So they required the people that were cut back to be at least interviewed by the surviving airlines. So like Braniff, which I work for, those pilots were considered by Piedmont under the law. And they hired a bunch of older pilots. And they actually did really well. There was the old adage that you hire somebody young and you keep them a long time and you get your good out of them, you get the training costs back. That makes a lot of sense if it's a different industry. But the airline industry is so heavily regulated that a pilot has to go to school every 6-9 months anyway. He has to train on the airplane anyway. So there's no real savings. So it doesn't make sense to hire a younger pilot and keep them a long time, because after a year or so, both pilots get the same amount of training. And once the pay scales are set, once you're over 12 years, everybody makes the same. So you can't save money by having a younger pilot. So the airlines gave that up, and they now hire pilots. We see the majors hiring pilots up into the 60s. So being 40 is no obstacle at all, other than if it's holding you back in your mind, you need to get over it. It really is not an issue. There are actually protections over 40 that you don't enjoy under 40. 40 is a protected group. So they must hire an equal number of qualified pilots that apply over 40, just like they would of women or minority candidates. And it's controlled by law. They report on it. It's checked by the government. And if you don't do it, they'll come after you. So as an over 40 pilot, you are actually protected in a way that under 40 pilots are not. So age is no barrier at all. Now, of course, seniority is really the commodity at the airlines. It determines your promotion, what you fly, when you fly, what you make, the size of your retirement, everything. And that all benefits from getting there as soon as possible. So you definitely want to qualify, train, get experience as quickly as you can, and get this job as quickly as possible. But the fact that you're 40 or 20 when you're doing that doesn't make any difference. Everybody wants to get there as quickly as possible, and 40 is not a disadvantage. I would even say, God forbid that some of the young folks are listening would take issue with this, but not everybody is a professional. So some guys show up for their flight training in flip-flops and cut off blue jeans, and they show up late and go home early. And older people who have been in the workforce tend to be more professional. So if you're younger, learn from them. If you're older, use that experience to be a good professional. They don't make everybody a flight instructor after they graduate. Only those that do a good job get the job. So your mission is to show up early, do your homework, do a good job in the airplane. If you do that, you will rise to the top. You will be the one chosen to be an instructor. You'll be the one that gets the opportunities. Older pilots often have an advantage in that because they've been out in the workforce and they have a good established work ethic. If you're a younger pilot, follow their lead. So that was one of them. And the other question I had was about flight instruction. What's going to happen to flight instruction? Well, flight instruction is holding up really good. I mean, it's more like corporate and charter. Some people are actually increasing their flight training, which I think is smart. Like I said, the ideal situation would be to continue your training, get your experience, and be in position for the upturn because it's going to come. So right now, it's hard to say. I mean, there probably will be schools. Not all flight schools are financially solvent. Not all flight schools are well positioned. And any company that's weak in a recession is vulnerable. So there may be some flight schools go away. Be careful. But in general, the ones that survive that are doing well will have the same or increased opportunities to build experience. And you need to choose wisely as you go into that so that you benefit from their stability and take that experience building. And the question is, what do you do next? Well, there's a lot of segments, like we said, corporate, fractional, charter, cargo, government contract, and government itself are all doing way better than the airlines. And they would be places you would likely take it after your flight instructor gig.
Like George has mentioned that if he's set to hit 1,500 hours around mid 2022, do you think that there will be a larger requirement to be competitive as far as total time?
Well, in the past, I tracked the regionals for 30 years, God forbid. But in the past, the average was a little higher. But it wasn't a lot higher. The average was 2,500 in the past at the regionals. So it came right down to 15 because of the shortage. That's another year, if you want to put it in time. If you're teaching regularly, that's an additional year. So it's not bad. I would expect it to go up. It's a supply and demand situation. I would expect the average flight time to go up. I would expect those wages that I showed to go down a little bit. I mean, this, again, supply and demand situation. These unions, almost all the big airlines are unionized, 100%, and they move slowly up and down. But with a sustained oversupply for a couple of years, there'll be pressure on wages to go down. So that should be expected. But if you saw the numbers, if you decrease those, say, 20%, it would still be a hell of a job. So not to be discouraged, and it will creep back up. I mean, as good times return and the shortage returns, then wages and benefits will come back up again as well. So did I answer the question? I'm not sure.
You did. And I think that something that we had discussed previously that I did want to highlight as well was when we were going over that chart was you had mentioned that for the regionals, yes, we might see that the bonuses are not in play or is not as great as they used to be. But something that you mentioned was throughout the past couple of years, because the contractual obligation is there for that increased first officer wage, that's almost a better thing because it has a little bit more stability than a bonus.
It does, and being a bonus is not ideal. It can easily be removed. And there was a big push on, and some airlines like Endeavor have moved that bonus mostly into initial pay. So that will be much more stable and much more likely to survive. I had a question on one of these about a college degree. So we talked last time a little about what the profile looked like to be successful. And it clearly includes a 4-year degree. So will it go away in the future? Even if it does, I mean, half of the airlines require it, the other half do not, the majors. The regionals do not require it. So if you want to work at a lower level, a 4-year degree is not required. But if you want to work at the majors, especially the largest established ones, the big three, Delta, United, American, the top freight companies, FedEx, UPS, you clearly need a 4-year degree. Of the ones that require it, it's 100%. Of the ones that prefer it, though, it's still over 90%. So when you put it together, practical, to be a professional pilot at the major airline level, 95% have a 4-year degree. And not just a degree. You actually saw the need to do well in school. We say take courses that you like, finish on time. They like to see a 4-year degree in 5 years or less, and good grades. Delta, which I'm most familiar with, and I can't speak for Delta, but they prefer a 3.0 GPA. They'll deal with it below 3.0, 2.5 or so, but they would expect at that point that you had something else going on. If all you did was go to school and made a 2.5 or less, they would prefer that you had done better. So if you're working or you're flying or playing sports or volunteering or doing all kinds of other things to go along with your 2.5, they'll deal with that. Now, the best situation is to have the 3.0 and all that other stuff. So I don't mean to sell that short, but a GPA is important. And the good news, some people here at least have a chance to make a difference in their GPA right now. Most of us that are mature pilots couldn't change that. It's long in the past. So you have to live with it. So if this is a heads up and you're in school, take care of your GPA. It's important. You need to know it's going to remain important. Will it go away in the future? It might, but the importance of the GPA and the desirability, the preference for a 4-year degree will always be there. I could never outline a plan for you that did not include a 4-year degree.
Looks like we had a question about the TSA data, if it's driven via RPMs or variance. So that is just the number of passengers that have gone through TSA daily, and they do try to correct it for those that have used the known crew member lines. So that's what we're seeing with that data. So whoever asked that question.
So we talked about So let's, we could, while we're waiting for more questions, I could address some of the things that I hear. I basically talk to pilots on a daily basis. I had a question about additional questions. I basically run a paid counseling service. So this is, get your shot in here. You can't beat the rates. So ask your questions. But I have a lot of folks that are worried about different things. Vision is one of them. It's left over from the old days. You don't have to have perfect vision. You would be ideal to be corrected to 20/20, but it is possible to be a professional pilot even at the highest level without 20/20. The major airlines have a pretty good number of one-eyed pilots, monocular pilots, and they've even hired one-eyed pilots. So there are all kinds of waivers and exemptions. Color vision is one of the issues there, and color vision, there's a flip book, which you may have seen at your AME, where you go take your medical and they flip through the book. You have to identify the numbers. That is actually a very difficult test. It's more difficult than necessary. The light gun test is an equivalent test, meaning if you pass the light gun, you have no color deficiency. So if you can't pass the book, take the light gun test. They're sort of hard to find, only at major regional centers of the FAA around the country. And then even if you are color deficient, there's a practical test, and most people can pass that. So there's very few people that are color deficient to the point that it will affect their career. Height weight is one. In the old days when I was hired, there was a height weight scale. And if you were out of the scale, you did not proceed. Your height and weight was on your app. And if you were over the scale, they didn't call. So that's gone away. It's illegal now. But I can tell you for sure that they're going to eyeball you and try to figure how you're going to look in their uniform. And if you're not going to look good in the uniform, they're going to be concerned about that. They're worried about their image. They're not supposed to discriminate on it, but how would you know? So I'm going to encourage those, as I always do, pilots, you need to be jogging and eating birdseed when you're trying to go through this career. In order to make it to 65, the career values, by the way, when you add up those salary numbers that I showed for the majors, they average about 10 or 11 million dollars, and they range from 7 to 14 million in today's dollars. If you're going to collect that, you have to have a medical. In order to have a medical, you have to be healthy. So you need to eat right and exercise, maintain that medical in order to benefit from this career. So I thought we got a couple of questions there. Anything else you want to address, Ashley? got something else?
So Mike would just like to know which airlines, and this is related to the recovery, which airlines you think are stable right now looking into the future, and maybe some variables on each of what quantifies that, maybe talking about like who has the more domestic travel, and then business travel. Do you see that demand decreasing in the future?
Okay, so the most stable ones right now are cargo. I mean, it's actually they've always been more stable. So they're looking really good. And then when you go into the passenger business, you have to look at the mix of the flying that they do. And the ones that are small fleets or single fleet or simple fleet, like 1 or 2 airplane types, less training when pilots move around, that's a good position to be in. So Southwest would be a great example, 1 airplane. In addition, they're all domestic, almost all domestic service. So domestic's going to come back faster. There's parts of the world you can't fly to now, the parts of the world that we won't let fly here, and parts of the world that won't let us fly there. So international is a big unknown going forward, how well that's going to recover. So domestic over passenger, single fleet over complex fleet. A Delta United American have 5, 6, 7 different airplanes. And when the pilots move down the list, they go from captain to co-pilot, and they go from large airplane to medium to small. Each one of those is a training event. Those are very costly. It's been estimated years ago that for a single captain to move off the top in retirement, it cost the airlines $500,000 in training underneath, and that was 10 years ago. It's probably $1 million. It's probably $1 million today when somebody has to move. And the reason that they do these early retirement programs and furlough off the bottom at the same time is to stabilize the middle of the list. By stabilizing the middle, they get less training, and the training is real expensive. So an example would be when I was at United, the 9/11 hit, and airlines had too many pilots. They furloughed off the bottom, and they offered early retirements off the top. I wasn't going to take an early retirement. I'm not sure I was eligible anyway, but I was in a place where they took enough off the top and took enough off the bottom that I didn't really change. And that's what they were trying to do. It was sort of embarrassing. I had friends that lost their job or moved to a smaller seat, and they would say, well, what happened to you? And I said, well, actually nothing happened to me. I was number 35 as a 767 captain in Chicago. And after they retired, 700 and furloughed a bunch, I was number 35 767 captain in Chicago. My life didn't change. My wife, by comparison, was a junior pilot, and she was furloughed for 3 years. And so it's a much better benefit for the airline to stabilize the middle of the list. That's what they want to do, because if everybody moves, it's going to take an inordinate amount of time and money to make those changes. So that's what they're trying to do. And picking a good airline right now, balance sheet is important. The airline with the best balance sheet out there is probably Southwest. Low debt, some of them have a lot more debt than others. It's a financial hard time, and it's easy to pick a winner if you look at it. But most of us as pilots are really never concerned about the health of our airline. As long as they're alive, you're doing great. So, but this is a serious situation. And if you're going to get a job, it would make sense to get a job with an airline that was financially sound and better positioned to do well in the future.
Well, guys, we are approaching our hour, and before we let Kit go, I would like to just show you one more area. I did share this in the chat, but this is additional data that you can go ahead and take a look at as we track what is happening every month with each individual sector of aviation. So if we go ahead and look at this data that I shared with you, you're able to see the steady increase throughout what happened in March to now moving forward, and you can break it down by each sector. So you can see cargo, for example. If we sort to just cargo, you can see that we're actually up 8% so far in July. So this is additional information that is available to you guys if you have additional questions outside of this or would like assistance with interpolating it, that's definitely something that you can talk to Kit about. Kit, do you want to go ahead and give them we'll go ahead and pull up your website really quick just to show how to reach out and contact you if they have questions on specifics.
Yeah, I do. I like talking to pilots. I do ask if you have it that you provide me a resume or a copy of your airline apps. And we do that just to shorten the amount of time it takes me to get to know you. I'm reluctant to provide advice if I don't know all about you, because I'll be telling you to do this and it'll turn out you don't have a degree, and that changes the whole plan. So I like to know a lot about you before we talk, and I can do that quickly with a resume or copy of airline apps, but it's not necessary. I can ask the questions and that I need and get an answer for you. I usually take about 30 minutes or so with you. If there's more severe problems, it can take longer. So if you're fighting a DUI and a Canadian waiver, if you have medical issues, I'm not a doctor, but I can help you make a good plan to get evaluated and help you find a doctor that will work with you. There's a few senior doctors that are specializing in helping pilots get or keep their medicals, that type of thing.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your data that you've comprised with us today. And again, if anyone has questions, you can go to kitdarby.com to reach out to Kit directly. For future webinars, you can go to atpflightschool.com/webinar. And we hope you all have a great weekend and fly safe.